Welcome to the Mindful Garden. Uh, Having my video a little earlier because I don't want to have my video. Excuse me. That's because of cannabis. Unfortunately for myself, I don't listen to my own good advice on that one. Anyway, um, I wanted to have my video a day early because I didn't want to have it on Remembrance Day because I think that's kind of a day just to leave for itself. And we'll touch upon about that a little bit in the video today. Let's just center ourselves with our 3 deep breaths and breathe and imagine ourselves in our energetic center. If you really want to power it up, imagine a cord going down to the center of the earth and wrapping around the center of the earth, and the energy of the earth coming through that cord to your center as well. And with some deep breaths, we get ourselves centered and we can have ourselves a good conversation. What are we going to talk about today? Strong energies, that's for sure. This is a changing time of year. We just came out of a full moon. That's been powerful. And we're coming into a time of remembrance from around the world that a lot of intention has been set behind. So when a lot of intention is set behind something, the whole collective responds to it, I have found. So just like holidays that are in a collective area that are all celebrated roughly the same, make it so that the holiday time is more energetic at that time. It makes sense to me that it just kind of goes that way. Hence why they kind of always put all the holidays together, because it just makes it easier on society and stuff. It's just they have their own little shifting of times between different religions and cultures and philosophies. But anyway, it's time of remembrance. We should remember it quite well. It's done on the 11th hour, the 11th day of the 11th month, and all of that. 11 is all specifically chosen for a reason, because it is significant. And that is why it's chosen for Remembrance Day. What the original people who put it that day, I can't remember if it was the armistice was signed that day. It's like, I even remember thinking that in World War I there was actually a battle that was fought, even though everything was gonna stop. There was a battle that was still fought just because the documents haven't been signed and they were going to sign them at a specific time. And they just kept on fighting just because of the way they were back then. And it seemed kind of strange that they would pick 11/11/11, which makes sense to me just because of its significance both spiritually and energetically, because it's a balanced number itself and balanced date. Very easy to remember, very easy to keep on point, I think, about it. I don't want to get into the politics of remembrance, because there's a lot of it that, like, I want to honor the people who died for what they thought was a noble cause, but when we look at it on a deeper level, we all know that it was done by people that were just making money off of war, and it just happens that we just keep perpetuating that same thing. They're just greedy people fighting over their control over the world and not really caring about the people involved at all. And in Canada, the people who were behind Remembrance Day were the soldiers, and they all wanted us to not have it happen again, but of course it did, and it's happened again and again, because lest we forget seems to be forgotten to me, and at some level, the way I look at it. But anyway, I shouldn't get too deep into that because I don't want to ruffle too many political feathers on that, because I think I should, like, I still respect everybody involved for what it was. It's just I see a lot of loss of life. I suppose there is a reason behind it, and making it a war makes it a reason that is noble in some people's minds, but that's just old thinking. I think now it's just a matter of us understanding that we don't need as many people. Like, I'm not saying that we need population control, that we go and kill people. I mean, we need population control that we live in balance with the earth, and we just naturally balance ourselves within the earth by having less children, like we already are. Like, it's naturally happening. We don't need to push it. It's just a matter of bringing people out of what is created poverty. Like, I don't even like that, because the poverty that is it's created. It's artificial creation out of, like, a culture of natives that live in their jungle habitats and are peaceful, are usually the most peaceful, happy people out there. And the same goes, like, the more isolated the tribe, the more pleasant and peaceful they seem to be, and just in balance with who they are. And that should be respected in some level, and we shouldn't consider it impoverished to be living in balance with nature, and, like, get back to living more in balance with nature and having people live upon the land and balancing the land and creating more wealth in the land. That's definitely possible, that's for sure. Yeah, let's continue down that. Like, I do like to talk about permaculture and restorative agriculture a lot. And in a time of remembrance is always think that the way to recover from any turmoil is to really restore and get back to nurturing the land. And that is exactly what we need to do, is we need to get back to nurturing the land instead of combating the land. Like, we've gotten into the point where in our agricultural system we've become almost combative with Mother Nature in trying to manufacture a way to get as much production as possible, and instead of getting the amount of production possible through Mother Nature, because Mother Nature puts it in so many layers that we can't ever compete with what Mother Nature can produce per acre to what we can produce in a single crop. It's just a matter of making it more usable, because we're able to do a single crop. I have some philosophies on how to do some growing. I would love to speak to farmers about on how to do some row cropping while leaving the forage crop on the field. In certain climates where they can get on the fields at a certain time and do an early enough hay cut where they can do a planting as well. And then instead of having a spray cycle that you get into, you have a maintenance cycle of a row crop mowing system that keeps the forage down while the crops grow. And eventually, just like when you're growing corn and stuff, you basically choke out the weeds and you choke out the forage crop a little bit, and the forage crop would remain because it wouldn't get choked out completely. But if you're, say, growing corn every once in a while in a hay field, instead of completely removing the hay, you just cut the hay really short, plant the corn, and then mow the hay in between the corn while the corn is growing that first little bit. But once the corn gets tall enough, you don't have to worry about the hay, and you just leave the hay underneath the corn, and the hay that nitrogen fixes can help feed the corn and keep the corn going and keep it so that the corn actually gets a much more productive crop. That's my philosophy, and I would love to give that a try sometime. And that's where I think like we need to turn our energies from, as a time. Let's wrap this into the remembrance, like to get away from a culture of conflict and push to a culture of peace. Like agriculture is the way of peace because we provide for many with the labor of a few. And if we do regenerative agriculture and get a few more people on the land that can work closely with the animals and get the animals to have a more peaceful, happy life, like our current agricultural factory farming system for our animals creates a little large amount of stress in the animals, and that comes through in the food and energetically affects us. I can't prove that in any way, but I think like when you think about it from a standpoint of a chicken eating it, whatever it desires outside, any bugs, fruit, corn, grass, whatever, it can kind of vary its diet and adjust its nutrients out to whatever it likes. But if it's just fed nothing but grain, it's just not getting the variety of nutrients that could be ingested and put into your eggs, for instance. So like your eggs, if it's grown so that it gets more nutrients from a varied diet, that doesn't have to be a supplemented grain-fed diet, and it can be a more natural, like prairie harvested, grazed diet. And they do that a lot in California. And in California, because of their generously good climate for the practice of it, if you modify the land to hold as much water as possible, you can do quite well there. Southern Ontario here, like I see Southern Ontario was a great place for regenerative agriculture. I think grazing agriculture here in Southern Ontario could take off again, because this used to be, like in the Niagara Peninsula, for instance, used to be quite a hay crop area, which is where you graze your animals. And they used to just have small fields where you just moved your cattle around and grazed them and raised your cattle and milked them close to home. We're done work on a dairy farm where they do still graze their cattle, and it's quite a peaceful operation, and the cattle love it. They go running out in the pasture and they go trotting along and enjoy themselves, and they're very peaceful, happy, and they come to you and they're very respectful of you. It's quite a nice interaction being in agriculture that way. And animals are a part of the ecosystem, and because we've destroyed the ecosystem, we need to develop agriculture that works as that ecosystem. And if you do a small scale farm with regenerative agriculture, you can get a very large production for a small area and actually be a very productive farm in a small area and make a large amount of money and employ actually quite a few people. Like if Joel Salatin, if you look him up, he does regular seminars and stuff like that. He's very well versed in regenerative agriculture, and there are many others like him throughout America. And down in Australia there's lots of permaculture. Permaculture is a different another way to explore. It's a little bit longer and takes longer to build up the soil, but I've been looking at a way of maybe kind of combining the two and seeing how, and I think I've actually witnessed the guy that does that down in Australia, where he uses chickens to nutrify the soil, and he uses that to spread out to nutrify the soil and build up the soils in the forest area, because the forest area hasn't had a chance to grow over the time and build up the nutrients like a forest does, because a forest is a slow build up. But I remember reading an article on the buildup of nutrients in the soil in Ontario that was actually from the bears and everything carrying fish into the forest. And that is where a lot of the nutrients came from in the soil. It was actually spread by bears and animal life by spreading sea life inward through the continent. And it was interesting how this all works. Like, Mother Nature had a beautiful system and we kind of destroyed it, and now we need to apply our knowledge. And like I said, there are many people out there that have done it, and like in the prairies, they're doing lots of grass-fed grazing. A&W, the fast food chain, all of their beef, the majority of it is grass-fed from a couple of farms out in Saskatchewan and Alberta, I think. And that's like it. I know a lot of people who are vegan and stuff like that, and that's another way to go to help preserve and help the environment. But animal agriculture is part of it, and there are ways to do it in a way to make it so that it actually builds carbon in the soil and restores the environment. And it does great things to the soil. There's research on this. I can point to it if you want. But yeah, like that's the real important thing, I think, is getting into restorative agriculture for us. And like, I'm older, so like I'm trying to encourage the young millennials to look into this and really think about it, because growing and providing your own food is such a rewarding thing. And even in the city, like when I worked and lived in the city, I was able to actually do quite well for myself for growing and preserving some of our own food. In the city, a vegan diet is much easier. You can grow grains like amaranth. It's called ponytails. You can grow that, and it's very easy to grow. Many cities in North America, you can grow ponytails and grow amaranth for yourself, and that's an ancient grain that's got lots of protein in it. You can probably get away with growing some hemp seed now, but your neighbors might not like it because you're going to ruin their actual cannabis medicine crops. But hemp seed is very productive per plant. You get quite a bit of seed out of a few plants if you do hemp seed that was as well. But that's why I suggested it to a couple farmers out in Saskatchewan, and they did grow it, and they're being quite successful at it out there, I believe. There's lots of people that are switching to organic and cutting out sprays, because the sprays are getting so expensive that the farmers are losing the ability to afford to pay for them, so they're just going on their own and finding out that they can use other ways to do it without spraying as much as they used to, which is nice to see. So there's things coming. Anyway, like I said, just wanted to speak today because I didn't want to speak tomorrow. I want to respect the day tomorrow. You guys have a great day. Let's close out with a prayer, and we'll open up hearts and give remembrance to all of those who put their hearts behind something that they thought were doing noble things. So everybody that lost their lives behind a noble purpose, let's give remembrance to them, and open hearts as well. Open hearts. You guys have a good night. Thanks for watching. If you did, have a good night. Bye.